Well, many of us start the day with eggs, but not many of us get those eggs from our backyards. That is something our guest today wants to change. Amy Snider is with the group Queen City Chickens. Her group is presenting at Regina City Council tomorrow, hoping to get the bylaw changed to allow backyard chickens. We'll hear from Amy coming up. We'll also hear how backyard chickens are working out for the city of Edmonton. And as always, we want to hear from you. Would you like to see backyard chickens allowed in your community? Or maybe you just have questions about what that would look like? Our guest today can help answer your questions. So call 1-800-716-2221 or email bluesky@cbc.ca. Amy Snider from the group Queen City Chickens is in our Regina studio. Amy, welcome to Blue Sky.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So tell us more about this. Why do you think Regina should allow backyard chickens?
Well, my first answer is why not? Backyard chickens make fantastic pets. They have wonderful, delightfully silly personalities. They put a smile on people's faces. They offer great companionship. They act like cats and dogs. They'll run out and follow you around your yard. They're just lovely creatures to be around. And furthermore, pretty much everywhere else in Canada allows urban hens. And so why not here?
What are the concerns, though, that people tend to have about backyard chickens?
The most common concerns that I hear repeatedly are that backyard chickens in the city will produce problems with neighbors due to them being either smelly, noisy, bringing in more vermin like mice and maybe even rats, that they will spread disease, and that they will bring in predators to the city. Those are the top 5.
And what do you say to address those concerns? Maybe start with the smell. Is there a smell?
Well, I mean, for people who have experience on a larger scale farm, of course, large hatcheries and large poultry operations, there will be a smell. But what we're trying to do here is allow people to have between 3 to 6 pet birds, which, I mean, they already do with other types of birds. When you have that small of a number of chickens, they're really not producing so much poop, and it's actually extremely simple to keep it clean. It's not much different from cleaning up your dog do in the backyard, and it certainly does not create a smell. I welcome people to come visit my coop, and they'll notice that it is not stinky at all.
What about the noise?
The noise, well, part of the bylaw would be that there would be no roosters allowed in the city, and that's clearly done in all other places that have backyard hen bylaws. Hens themselves are very, very quiet. Most of the time, in fact, they're absolutely silent. I have one girl, her name's Martha, who likes to chatter as she goes about her day. She makes little cooing sounds like it's adorable. She sometimes even makes a trumpeting sound where she goes bark, 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 bark.
That's a very good imitation.
Thank you. I've been working on it. And that's really basically it. There are a couple of occasions when they'll be a little noisier. If a stray, like feral cat wanders into your yard, it might scare them. My neighbor's cats don't bother my girls at all, but if a feral cat, a more predatory cat comes in, the chickens will let out a panic call, which is that very, very loudly. Sometimes there are squabbles over their favorite nest box in the coop. But those noises last only a few minutes. If I'm at home, I can go out and shush them, and that works. And furthermore, chickens are always asleep when it's dark out. They put themselves to bed, they go into the coop and put themselves to sleep on their roosting post as soon as it becomes dark.
So they're better than kids.
Absolutely. Better than street cats that are having fights, better than dogs barking. When it's dark out, your chickens are silent.
What about the final concerns, the rats, the mice, or other larger predators?
So regarding vermin like mice and rats, first of all, they are already in the city, and if you're feeding wild birds, you're attracting mice to your property. If you have a compost bin, you're attracting mice to your property. With this bylaw, it would be so strict, there would be such strict regulation that you would even need to have a mouse-proof container for your chicken feed. I mean, if you think about that for a minute, we don't regulate other pets nearly that much. I once accidentally left a bag of wild bird seed in my garage over winter and realized I had a mouse infestation when it was too late. But with chickens, in the bylaw, you would be regulated, you would be required to keep your chicken feed in, for instance, steel garbage pails. And so this is to deter mice. Furthermore, inside of the coop, generally chickens are only inside their coop during the night when they're sleeping or when they go in to lay an egg. And the rest of the time they're outdoors. But if it's very cold out and they're cooped up, like when it was minus 50 recently, I do feed them inside the coop then. And I have something called a treadle, which is a steel box. And on the bottom of it, there is a sort of plate that when a hen steps on the plate, it opens up a little trough where there's chicken feed. When the chicken isn't standing on the plate, the trough is closed. And as I said, it's made of steel, and this also helps to deter mice from being in the coop. Regarding larger predators, I know that several people are concerned about the number of coyotes in the city, especially in the neighborhoods that are more on the outskirts. Well, coyotes, again, are already coming into the city, and they would definitely prefer to go after a rabbit or a cat than a chicken that can certainly, run away, fly away, and defend itself. Well, I shouldn't say they'd prefer. I mean, I'm sure they'd love a tasty chicken. But, I mean, chickens are very good at protecting themselves. They have very sharp beaks. They have sharp claws. And also, as I said, chickens are in bed during the night, which would be locked up in an indoor coop. And during the daytime, again, here we go to the strictness that would be regulated into the bylaw. Chickens would actually not be allowed to be free-ranging in your backyard. You would be required to have a chicken run, which is an enclosed area, fenced off, so that the chickens are protected from predators and they don't go rogue. They don't go wandering around town, which they wouldn't do anyways, to tell you the truth. But yeah, the bylaw that we're asking for would enforce all of these regulations so that we would be protecting the chickens, we would be guarding against predators, we'd be protecting the owners of the chickens and their neighbors from all sorts of concerns. I don't know if I mentioned disease. Did I?
No,
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so let's see. The noise, the smell, predators, vermin, disease. So this is a very, big concern because chickens do potentially have salmonella in their poop. Not all do. It depends if they're carrying it or not. And other illnesses as well. But I would like to point out that so many pets that we currently have in our homes also carry those diseases. In fact, cats can carry salmonella, and cat feces is actually very dangerous for the toxoplasmosis that it can have. And so, furthermore, water animals, so think of reptiles, amphibians, they also carry salmonella, and when you're handling your pet turtle, you're getting it all over your hands. And so that's one thing I'd like to point out, and also that there are wild birds who fly by or stop in your yard, and they make droppings as well that we're exposed to. So in terms of things that humans can catch from chickens, as long as people take proper hygiene measures, there shouldn't be that risk. And regarding avian bird flu, that's another big concern, and rightfully so. There are studies out there showing that backyard hens can contract avian flu, and it is a disease that can be spread to people. But in our experience from talking with people across the entire country with backyard hen bylaws, this isn't a big concern for most of them. And in fact, here again, we emphatically want a bylaw to protect people and animals from avian flu. And the reason I say that is we currently have many chickens in the city. They are in the chicken underground.
The underground,
And,
yes, the underground scene.
With a bylaw, people would be required to have a property identification number. They would be listed then in the provincial registry of homes with poultry. And if there is an outbreak of avian flu or any other such dangerous disease, then all of those licensed chicken keepers would be given strict guidelines, regulations on what to do, which may include keeping your girls isolated and locked up, not letting them out, or even necessarily killing them.
One city that does have a bylaw, I want to bring in a conversation that I had earlier out of Edmonton, River City Chickens. Yeah. And so Edmonton does have a bylaw, and a group really put a lot of work into pushing for this bylaw, but they've also created this program, Chicken 101, that you have to take before you get a permit to have hens in your backyard. So let's listen to this conversation that I had with Linda Johnson, who is with River City Chickens.
Good morning.
So how did River City Chickens come to be? What's the story here?
River City Chickens began because there's a group of like-minded individuals that were keen to legally have backyard hens. So many meetings were held in information sessions and education for each other and through the general public. And this group was formed so that we could together approach our city council and work with our bylaw so that we could find a way to legally have backyard hens.
And how long have you been operating? Well, actually, first off, how long has Edmonton allowed backyard hens? And then how long has your group been part of that?
So good question. So the group existed well before permission was granted. I have been a volunteer with the group a couple years before backyard hens became permissible. So I've had my hens. I was one of the first 18 in the city in the pilot program, and that was 2016.
Okay. And how has it been for you personally?
I really enjoy it. The hens have been interesting in ways that I didn't anticipate. I knew that they would provide eggs, and that part is what gets most people into it, of course. But they're really interesting, and it actually brought a real sense of community as our neighbors learned about it, and neighborhood children wanted to come and see the chickens, and people would save their vegetable scraps to bring into the chickens. And, I have some lettuce. Can I bring that in? So we really got to know our neighbors a lot more because of the chickens. And it was interesting, too, because I've never had trouble finding a volunteer if we're going on holidays or things like that to chicken sit for us. There's a lot of interest in them.
And what does the organization do to support others who are interested in having hens in their backyards?
Great question. So initially, the organization was the only one within the city that was offering Chicken 101. So we'd offer a course, and it was taught by a couple members and a veterinarian. And it would teach you everything you needed to know about keeping a hen specific to our city's requirements and our city's climate, right? Because keeping a hen in Edmonton or in Saskatchewan is a lot different than down in California, for example. So all the information was specific to our needs. And so they'd offer these classes, but they also run a Facebook group and offer mentoring. Within the Facebook group, you can find a mentor if you need to help you out on your path to keeping hens. So
what does happen?
We also went out and did a lot of outreach in the different neighborhoods and at farmers markets and at the zoo and things like that to set up booths and talk to the community about what urban hen keeping involved.
And how accepted are backyard hens in Edmonton? Do you still get a bit of pushback from people?
It's interesting. I feel like in the beginning there certainly was some pushback. And one of the things that we did is once we had the pilot program going, I'd had to go to council to decide if it would continue or expand. And there were a few councillors that were not in favor of it. And what we did is invite them into our yards to see our setups and the hens and show them what it was all about. And in particular, I had one of our councillors come over who was quite against it. And it was a complete turnaround. And he said, what I was imagining isn't what it was. And he had grown up on a farm with 400 chickens, and he just had such a different image of the sound and the smell and just what it would involve. And then you walk into this quiet little backyard. You would never even know that there's chickens in there. And I had, 4 chickens, and he loved it. He said, I didn't have any idea. So he just completely changed his thinking, because we can't know what we don't know, right? So he'd imagined something totally different. When I did get them, of interest also is I had them for about 4 months, and I still had neighbors that didn't know I had gotten them. They'd never heard them. And certainly hens do make noise when they lay an egg, but they don't make noise all day. They're not roosters. We don't have roosters. And when the sun goes down, they stop making noise. And they're quieter than any dog, right? So, I had neighbors that it took them months to even recognize that I had hens in my yard. And so that was kind of interesting to me.
What are are there common mistakes that people make when they're first starting out, if they haven't taken your Chicken 101 yet? What are some of the most common mistakes?
Well, in the city of Edmonton, you cannot get the permit unless you've taken a course. Now, there's a few different people also, different groups that offer the course, and one through the University of Alberta also. You just wouldn't be able to get a permit. And I suppose a person could do it, but it really sets you up for success. Understanding what their needs are, how to build a safe coop, something safe from predators, protects them from the elements. And it's easy to make mistakes because you think, I'm going to enclose them really warm and keep all the cold air away from them. But what's really dangerous to them is the humidity. So, you're building a warm coop, but you have to have open areas for air exchange. And that's, I think, the most difficult thing for people to wrap their heads around. How can it be warm and open? But it's in the city, you must take the course to get the permit.
What advice do you have for communities that currently do not allow chickens to make sure it's done right?
Well, I think that people should be open-minded to it. It's actually a really great initiative. There's a lot of pros to it, and I think that what people are worried about is not really what's going to happen, right? It's a really positive experience. And information, read as much as you can. Having a group together with a course like that, that's been really instrumental in the success in Edmonton, making that course part of it, because then people are equipped to do it, and they have the information they need. And, sometimes there's people that take the course and decide it's not for them, and that's okay too, right? So having them go through that step, it's been really positive here in Edmonton. And, a lot of things people were worried about, the noise, not an issue, cleanliness, that kind of thing, not an issue. There's very, very many positive things that come from it, and very few negative things you ever see. And if something is negative, it's not necessarily accurate perception, right? It's just people's idea of what it might be.
But if there is something negative or a concern that a neighbor has, is there a process for the city to
come and
check it out?
Yeah, there is, of course. Just like if somebody's dogs were barking all day, you could follow up with bylaw, same kind of thing, right? You could let them know. When our program initially started, bylaw did come and inspect every coop and make sure that it met everything. Initially, you also needed permission from your neighbors. You no longer need permission. You just let them know. You just have to inform your neighbors that you're doing it. But they've recognized that, of course, the impact on the neighbors is minimal, if anything. So you no longer need the permission. So there's been some changes in that way that are positive, too.
Interesting. Well, Linda, I appreciate you talking to us today. Thank you.
Hopefully things go well.
That's Linda Johnson with River City Chickens in Edmonton. I'm Leisha Grabinski. This is Blue Sky. Our guest today is Amy Snider from the group Queen City Chickens. She's making her case to Regina City Council this week to allow backyard chickens in Regina. Amy, I've got questions for you, but I'll quickly get you just to kind of answer a yes or no, and then we'll get you to elaborate after news headlines. But is there an educational component in what you're asking of the city of Regina? We heard they're all about Edmonton's Chicken 101. Do you see something like that working here?
For sure. Yes, it would be required here is what we're suggesting.
It would be required. Okay, well, we'll talk more about that in just a second. But first, let's go to David Shield, who joins us with today's news headlines. Hi, David.
Hi, Lisa. Jurors at the James Smith Cree Nation coroner's inquest are busy deliberating. 30 witnesses testified over the last 2 weeks talking about the mass stabbing. Jurors can make recommendations on how to prevent a similar tragedy in the future. Sask Power has signed an agreement this morning with GE Hitachi. It's meant to allow both companies to work together on developing a small modular reactor in the province. A go-forward decision won't be made on the project until 2029. And a Newfoundland doctor says Saskatchewan needs a working hyperbaric oxygen chamber. The province's only hyperbaric chamber has been shut for the last 3 years. The therapy pumps pure oxygen into people's bodies, and it can help cancer patients and people suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning. And I'll have a full newscast for you coming up at 1 o'clock.
David, thank you.
You're welcome.
That is the CBC's David Shield. We hope that you'll join the conversation today about backyard chickens. The number to call is 1-800-716-2221. You can also email us, bluesky@cbc.ca. We did get a couple of emails already. So Jacqueline writes, I'm thrilled that backyard chickens are being brought to the attention of our city officials. This is one step towards a more sustainable, environmentally responsible lifestyle. Many other cities across Canada, including Vancouver, allow residents to keep chickens. These cities have seen great success with their programs. Regina can be a leader and show the rest of Saskatchewan that backyard chickens are the way of the future. Thank you to Amy and crew for moving this forward. Our guest today is Amy Snider with Queen City Chickens. Amy, you've done a lot of research into this and have checked out what is happening in other jurisdictions. And so far, nope, there are no communities in Manitoba or Saskatchewan that allow backyard chickens. Why do you think that is?
Well, you're right. I've actually personally spoken to city bylaw officers and administrators in over a dozen places in Saskatchewan. None allow chickens. And in Manitoba, I've done less research, but I know the major urban centers don't. My theory is that despite the fact that several people say to me, well, we're an agricultural province, of course we would allow chickens. It's actually the opposite that is true. I think it's because we are an agricultural province that people have misconceptions about what urban backyard coops and hens would look like. And in fact, they may be basing their opinions on, as I said earlier, much larger scale poultry producing farms or large flocks that their parents or grandparents had. And so they're remembering perhaps the smells and the sounds that come from those very large or much larger flocks. And I think that this is what leads to the bias against urban chickens in the city. This overall belief as well that the farm is the farm and the city is the city. And if you want to have chickens, leave the city. I've heard and read that a few times, and I think it's unfortunate because, as I said, we're allowed so many other pet birds, even quail, and not chickens. I call it discrimination. I mean, yeah.
So how, in your mind, how would people in the city benefit from this?
Well, as your previous caller, Linda in Edmonton, mentioned, in addition to the therapeutic value that chickens give their owners and neighbors and friends who come to visit, is the sense of community building that comes from having hens in a neighborhood. Just as Linda said, with regards to her hens bringing in neighbors who have table scraps to feed her girls and wanting to chicken sit when she goes away, I've experienced the same thing here. Many people I know in my neighborhood and in my friend circle come over to my yard just simply to sit and watch my chickens. It's a pastime. It's a way to relax. It's different from screen time. It's outdoors. It's calming and therapeutic. There's a lot of research into the beneficial therapeutic value of birds, the sounds they make and just their actions. And so people come together and come and spend time with the chickens. And will, want to participate in feeding them or collecting their eggs. There can be some trading going on. I will say that the bylaw would prohibit people from selling their eggs, but there could be trading, friendly bartering. I have to say I've traded a few eggs for someone else's honey that they had had their bees in their backyard produced. And that sort of interaction just feels so good. It feels so very different from the type of transactions that take place in large grocery stores, where you don't know where that food has come from. You don't know how many hundreds or thousands of kilometers it has traveled. You don't know what went into it.
I think you're going to like our next guest, Amy.
Yes.
Tova Danovich is the author of Under the Henfluence, Inside the World of Backyard Chickens and the People Who Love Them. And we're going to hear more about Tova's relationship with hens and how this really put her on quite a journey. So we're going to talk to her in just a moment, but we do have a couple of callers on the line that we'll get to first. So Dwayne in Carrot River. Hello to you, Dwayne.
Hello.
What's your take on this?
Well, I have a definite no, and I'll explain why. My first thought is that people talk about there's no smell. And my concern about that is maybe human beings can't smell, but that coyote and that weasel and that badger and that fox can smell that from a quarter of a mile away. And the next time somebody puts their cat outside and they can't get into your chicken pen, they gobble up your neighbor's cat. And I don't think people have thought about that. They tell us, even in campgrounds and whatever, look after your food so you don't attract bears into town, do this and this. And so that's my first big concern, and I don't think people have thought too much about that. Second thing is, you can't control the little birds that have avian flu. The first thing that happens when avian flu occurs in Canada, they tell you to stop feeding your birds because you're just spreading it from one bird to another to another. And those little birds can get in and into where you're feeding or housing your chickens, and especially if you've got mesh wire. And next thing you know, you've got an outbreak of avian flu that you're encouraging to happen. And lastly, and this has always puzzled me, if you want to have a rural life, which I do, I buy an acreage, and I can have a horse or a donkey or chickens or geese or pigeons or whatever, and I can make myself as happy and relaxed and whatever watching all of these animals. But I don't think that people in the city should think that they can bring that rural life into the city and have positive consequences other than for just themselves.
Okay.
So I think that the person who's talking about this should say, I'm going to sell my house in Regina or Saskatoon or whatever, and I'm going to find a nice acreage close to town, and I can have both worlds.
Dwayne, I appreciate you calling. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Hi, it's Dwayne in Carrot River, and I'm sure for both Amy and our next guest, Tova, you've heard some of those arguments before. So let's say hello to Tova Danovich, the author of Under the Henfluence, Inside the World of Backyard Chickens and the People Who Love Them. She's a journalist in the U.S. and tells a bit of a love story in this book. Tova, hello. Welcome to Blue Sky.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
You've been listening. Before we get into your own personal journey, do you have some initial thoughts to share on this topic as a whole? We're not the only jurisdiction having this conversation, right? You've been here before in some ways.
Yes, I mean, we are having the same conversation in a lot of cities in the U.S. too, so this is not a new topic. I think over the last certainly 20 years, when kind of the local food movement really started up again, one of the things that came along with, garden in your backyard, go to farmers markets, was what if we get chickens in the backyard? So this conversation is not new, certainly, for us or for you up north. As far as the caller's comments, I mean, certainly if you do want a more agricultural life, moving out of the city is a great way to do that. I would say as far as, the issue around predators and cats is concerned, having outdoor cats, similarly, extremely controversial. So that's always one of the things. If you want your outdoor cat to be safe, keep them inside, and then that's not an issue anymore. But I think by and large, when it comes to predators, both small, rats and mice that might get in the coop to large ones. Those are all things that are really in our city. And we might think that, having chickens or having XYZ other things is going to bring them there because suddenly we start seeing them. But, our restaurants, the fact that there are only so many hunting grounds in a city means that those animals are already around us. I think that just something like having chickens makes us so much more aware of what's going on both with wild animals outside and in nature around us as far as weather goes, because they are birds who live outside.
Before I ask Tova more questions, Amy, I do want to give you a chance to respond to Dwayne and just what you make of him saying, if you want chickens, move to a farm.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I mean, you could say, why do we have cats and dogs in the city? Why other pets are allowed? I mean, they're animals as well. And sure, if you go for the all or nothing argument, I guess people would have to move to a farm in order to enjoy chickens. But I don't ever buy that line of argumentation, and I don't see why that's a logical reason to not allow a few pet chickens. As I said, we're talking, up to 6 birds, and other birds are already allowed here. I think that I would love to have this caller come over to my backyard and visit my coop and witness the fact that it is so different from what you'd have in the countryside.
So Tova, I'm wondering if you can place yourself a bit in this story. Were you under the influence before you started writing this book, or what happened to you?
What happened is such a great question. I started as a journalist doing a lot of food journalism. And at the time when I began my career, I was in New York City, which people do have chickens in New York City, more so in Brooklyn than Manhattan. But it's hard to come by a yard with space. And so when I moved to Portland, one of the things on my list was, hey, I'm moving to a place where I'm going to have a yard. That means I can get chickens. For me, it really came from the animal welfare perspective of knowing quite a bit about how poorly egg-laying hens are treated in the egg industry and wanting to do something that was different than that and gave these birds a better life. But initially I really thought that they were going to be, kind of paying rent in exchange for me taking care of them. And I knew that I liked them enough to keep them alive, but not that I would fall in love with them. And so I got mine as baby chicks. I started with 3, which is a very reasonable number that many people start with. And just watching them grow from chicks into, gangly teen chickens, into hens. I just had so many questions about, who these birds were and what they were doing and why, and what is our relationship to chickens. There's so many breeds, hundreds of varieties when you look at even recognized varieties of chickens in terms of their size, the color of eggs that they lay, the color of feathers that these birds have. Some of them have little poofs on their heads or giant feet. There's just such a world of chickens, which of course, they're domesticated animals. They didn't just spontaneously develop a lot of these things. We kind of bred them into the birds. And so as I had more questions, I kind of did what I usually do and was like, well, I have to write about it. And I really wanted there to be a book that answered my questions. There wasn't. So I was like, I guess I have to write it myself.
So as you're putting on your journalism cap to do this, how important do you think something like backyard chickens will be? Will they be increasingly important as we face climate change? I'm just thinking about how we all live and how big our cities are. Are backyard chickens going to play an important role, do you think?
I don't think with the scale of current egg consumption, just globally, that there is a world in which we can have backyard chickens that will somehow pick up all of the slack for these giant industrial farms that we produce eggs in right now. And the way that they are producing eggs on these farms is so different from our backyard hens. Some people do go about it in a much more practical way, where when these hens slow down their laying around 2 or 3 years old, they might get rid of them either by rehoming or slaughtering them, which is certainly a question. Other people want to keep their ladies as long as possible because they become pets who you really like fall in love with and care about as individual personalities, which could mean keeping your hens for up to 10 or 15 years. Some chickens can live for quite a long time. And even though some of them might lay an egg, here and there throughout that period, it's not going to be every single day, which is what these production breeds do that we have on egg farms. And most of those hens are sent to slaughter around a year and a half or so old, as soon as their egg production drops off even a little bit. So mimicking that in a backyard is really not going to be possible. I think what these hens do is, they take the place of pets. They certainly do have a lot of therapeutic value just in the way that our dogs and cats do. I think they get us outside in a really wonderful way. If you want to spend time with your hens, you're going to sit in the garden with them. You're going to be getting some fresh air and sunlight and listening to those beautiful little sounds that the hens make. And that is really valuable. And I also think that backyard chickens have really done a lot to help reframe the conversation around what is acceptable in the egg industry. Should we be keeping hens in these tiny battery cages anymore when we can see in our yards or maybe our neighbors' yards where we're visiting the chickens that these birds have a lot of personality and have natural behaviors that they want to express, and they are not going to get those done.
And Amy, you know all about their personality, right? And how the therapeutic value of them too. You have a doctor's prescription for emotional support chickens, right, Amy?
That is correct.
Yeah. So maybe I'll get you to elaborate a bit on that side of it and just what these animals have done for you personally.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I got my 4 girls at first as rental chickens, which is a thing you can do. You could have them for summers only and return them to the farms over the winter. I had them in the first summer of COVID as a way to bring some liveliness into my family's life. I did not realize that they would be there to stay, but at the end of the summer, we just didn't want to get rid of them. They really did brighten our lives so much, my son's as well, and he too suffers from anxiety. I myself have severe problems with depression and anxiety. And so I spoke to my doctor and asked if he'd write a letter in case anybody did report me. I was, flying under the radar at that point. He said, I'll write you a prescription, and I have an official prescription for chickens. I've looked this up, and the province of Saskatchewan actually protects our right as citizens to have support animals. They differentiate them from service animals, which need training. But a support animal is one that makes, you feel better if you're suffering from any type of mental distress. And that is what my girls do. They are so funny to watch, even the way they just jerkily move their heads around and flutter from one place to another and scratch in the dirt looking for grubs or treats and sunbathe and dust bathe, and they're joyful, and they're joyful all day long. I also have cats. I love cats. I foster cats for a rescue. But frankly, my cats are sleeping for most of the day, right? And dogs often are too. And chickens, on the other hand, as I said, they sleep when it's dark, but they are awake all the time during the day, and they are chickening around. They're doing their thing, and whatever it is they're doing, it's kind of funny. There's something about them that makes people laugh.
Bringing you joy. Well, Amy, thanks for sharing that side of it. Our guests today are Amy Snider, who's with the group Queen City Chickens in Regina, and then we also have Tova Danovich, who's the author of Under the Henfluence, Inside the World of Backyard Chickens. We have another caller on the line, Wayne in Beaver Flats. Hello to you, Wayne.
Hello, good afternoon.
Where do you land on this issue?
Well, I've experienced it. I live in Swift Current, and I had a neighbor that, and we actually have a bylaw that says that we're not allowed, there's certain animals and that we're not supposed to have within the city limits. And one of those is chickens. And I just wanted to address some of the comments that were made. Is that, and I speak from experience, is that the noise factor. Well, most cities, the property lines are very close. Like when I'm in my backyard, I have a 6-foot high fence, and on the other side of that fence is that backyard with chickens. And free roaming. These chickens were not confined to a backyard. They would come and go. And as most of you would know, is that the free roaming chickens, they come and go as they please. And they do defecate on other properties other than their own. And the smell is not an issue unless it's really warm. I must say, like in July or August, if we have a heat spell and it's not cleaned up, then we can get a whiff of the strong urine smell that there is. And then the other piece is that it's not the neighborhood norm, and I think that message is being lost in the ongoing conversation about neighborhoods and what's acceptable and what's not.
What do you mean? What do you mean, Wayne, by it's not the neighborhood norm?
Well, most cities, if not all, they have certain areas of development. 70s, the 2000s, in that, and so the neighborhood that we're in, the norm is that there's a certain acceptable behaviors, and wildlife or animals like chickens, hens, are not permissible by law. And so I think that the discussion around, has been lost around, okay, what about me, the non-chicken owner? How do what about me? What about the non-owner of a chicken? Because right now it's not a neighborhood norm, and maybe that'll change. And then if it does by bylaw, then I support that. One of the suggestions was in an earlier conversation that I had at the community level was, why don't we designate a zone in future development in cities for this type of backyard, whether it's chicken, hen, these types of things.
I'll stop you there, Wayne, because I'll let Amy address maybe two of those things. So the first thing you brought up was that the neighbor has chickens that are free roaming. So Amy, I'll ask you if the bylaw what you're asking Regina City Council, could it address something like that? And then let's maybe delve into the second question. If there was a designated spot for this kind of urban agriculture, is that maybe a way to address this?
Yeah, well, first of all, of course, the bylaw that we're asking for would strictly regulate the places where chickens could go. And as I said, not only would they be required to stay on someone's property, and that property would need to be fenced in, but in addition to that, the chickens would not be allowed to free range unless the owner is watching them. Otherwise, the chickens would be constrained to a chicken run. So there would be none of this appalling behavior of chickens roaming wild and pooping on neighbors' lots. That just would not happen, mind you. It does with cats and sometimes dogs, but it would not happen with chickens if they are law-abiding people. Regarding the idea of having chickens in just a few areas, or this idea of it not being the norm, I would actually say to Wayne that chickens are backyard urban chickens are allowed in most Canadian cities of Regina size and larger, from Vancouver, Victoria, Edmonton, and Calgary, all the way across the country into Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes. And I've spoken to people all the way in the Yukon. Chickens are allowed in these places. They just might not be in Swift Current because Saskatchewan does not allow them.
Right. Let's bring in another caller here. Thanks, Wayne, for joining us. Lyndon's got another question in Prince Albert. Hi, Lyndon.
Good day to you.
What's your question, Lyndon?
I'm hoping you can help out. I've heard that chickens are prolific insect eaters. So would they not be a good source of bed bug and cockroach consumers in a home?
Ooh, Tova, do you know the answer to that?
I would say that humans in particular have a really long history of thinking that we can bring in animals to solve our problems with other animals. And often that doesn't work super well. If you have a mouse problem and you get a cat to address it, sometimes you'll get a cat that's a really great mouser, but you might get one who prefers sitting on the couch and sleeping all the time. So chickens certainly do eat a lot of insects, but they have preferences in what they're eating, just like any other animals. Mine really love like worms in the soil, spiders. We don't really have cockroaches around our yard, so I couldn't say if any of my ladies would enjoy catching and eating one. But I would guess they're pretty, they have those hard shells. If I were a chicken, I don't know that would be the first thing that I would go to. So they certainly can help with insect populations, but I think we have a lot of like wild birds that do a great job of that as well.
So Tova, as you've been hearing, this is going to Regina City Council this week. And because you've written a book and you've done a lot of research and you personally are invested in some hens, what would you say is the most important lesson that you've personally learned from this journey you've been on that might inform folks that are making some big decisions on this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think chickens are really wonderful. And one of the things that's great about them is they really appeal in different ways to all kinds of age groups. Like just even when I've been on book tour for this book, I'll get kids who come that are as young as 8, and then people who are my grandparents' age, who, grew up maybe having chickens on a farm instead of in a backyard and have very fond but like different memories of chickens from what we have today. And I think that that's really wonderful that they've been part of our history for so long, that they are these small animals where if you have young children, I think they're actually a really wonderful pet for young kids because they can do things like collect the eggs when they're too little to do maybe, feeding and water changes and cleaning the coop and things like that. So in terms of that, really lovely. I think the biggest issue that I often see with people who get into hen keeping is maybe not doing enough of research ahead of time. And there are, chicken 101 class. There's so many great books about raising chickens, what you have to look for in terms of health issues, which can keep your flock healthy. And also if you are in an area with, wild birds or other chickens nearby, that can be really great to help keep diseases or other issues from potentially spreading. But I think, having that really predator-proof coop is super important to your enjoyment of chickens.
And I think what I've taken from this conversation is that if there's a bylaw, then some of these things can be enforced. So, Amy, I'll give the last word to you. What are you expecting from City Council? I'm wondering, do you have a number of people presenting? Or are you hopeful this will pass? This is the week.
Yes, I know. It's the big day we've been working towards for 3 years. We have 17 people who are making delegations in support of this motion. 13 will be speaking directly to council during the meeting, and 4 are written. There are 0 people signed up to speak against it. That said, I'm not terribly optimistic. I know that I have a job still to have 6 fairly anti-chicken councillors get on board, and I've been trying so hard. So I'd like to say lastly, chickens are here and more are on their way. People know that everywhere else in the country people are doing this, and they want to do it here too, and they will, whether it's legal or not. And my group just wants it to be legal so that it's safe and healthy and everyone's looked after.
Well, I've learned a lot in this conversation from both of you and from the callers who raised concerns, so I appreciate this. Amy, thank you.
Thank you.
And Tova, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good luck.